Seighford Hall in Stafford is a Grade 2 listed building, and its history spans over 450 years, from Tudor craftsmanship, ghostly encounters, and even a stint as a nightclub. The hall was built in the late 16th century by Richard Auld. He acquired the land as part of his rise to prominence. He was originally from Derbyshire, but he served as treasurer and steward to Walter Devereux, the first Earl of Essex, who was a significant figure in Elizabethan England. In 1574, Auld was granted a coat of arms and crest, solidifying his status among England's rising gentry. Seighford Hall was constructed on a greenfield site, indicating a deliberate effort to establish a new family seat. And the original hall was designed in the Tudor architectural style, featuring timber frame construction, small panel framing, and decorative bracing. The Staffordshire hearth tax of 1666 records that Francis Auld, Richard Auld's descendant, was assessed for 6 hearths, placing Seighford Hall among the larger homes in the area. Richard Auld's connection to Walter Devereux not only influenced his acquisition of the estate, but also tied Seighford Hall to broader historical events. This involvement placed Auld in a position of considerable responsibility and trust, which reinforced his ability to secure resources for the construction of the hall. The Auld family retained ownership of Seighford Hall for centuries, shaping its history and leaving a lasting impact on Staffordshire. And after the death of Francis Auld in 1760 without issue, the estate passed to his half-brother, John Auld of Dorking in Surrey. John was a prominent figure of his time and played a significant role in the development of public infrastructure in the county. Notably, he was a key benefactor of the Stafford General Infirmary. His contributions to the hospital were commemorated in a full-length portrait by the renowned artist Thomas Gainsborough, which depicts John holding the plans for the building. John lived to the remarkable age of 92, passing away in 1796, and the estate was passed to his son, Francis Auld. It was Francis that undertook significant renovations to the hall, reflecting the architectural tastes of the Georgian period. These included the addition of brick wings to either side of the original timber frame structure. These Georgian modifications not only updated the hall's appearance, but also expanded its functionality. A watercolour painting by Thomas Peploe Wood in 1838 captures the hall's transformed appearance. The hall stayed in the Auld family for many years, until the early 20th century, when Seighford Hall became the residence of Colonel William Warrington Dobson. Dobson's influence was deeply rooted in the town of Burslem, where he chaired Parker's Brewery. His contributions extended beyond business though. He was appointed High Sheriff of Staffordshire in 1915, and his military service was as equally distinguished. He played a key role in organising the Staffordshire Territorial Association, served as Honorary Colonel of the 41st Searchlight Regiment, and he was also a philanthropist. He was especially devoted to improving the lives of children in Burslem, ensuring that Christmas was a time of joy for the less fortunate. In his will, he left £1,000 to fund annual Christmas treats for poor children, which included tea parties and concerts. During World War II, Parker's Brewery subsidised these events to maintain the tradition despite wartime hardships. And in 1933, the towns of Burslem and Stoke honoured him with a magnificent presentation cask made by Royal Dalton. During Dobson's time at Seighford Hall, the estate became a hub of social and cultural activity. The North Staffordshire Hunt regularly met in the grounds, reflecting its importance within the county's social calendar. The hall's extensive grounds and historical charm made it a fitting venue for these gatherings, which drew participants from across the region. Dobson's death in 1941 marked a turning point for Seighford Hall. With no immediate heirs to take over the estate, the hall was left empty, beginning a period of decline. During World War II, the hall took on a new role, serving as a post for the Home Guard. The saddle room was converted into an armoury, storing grenades, rifles and other weaponry to support the nearby RAF Seighford airstrip. At the same time, Seighford Hall became a YWCA hostel for off-duty members of the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. It was a place for them to relax and socialise, and male visitors were allowed during designated hours, but were strictly prohibited from staying overnight. Seighford Hall's architecture reflects the changing tastes and needs of its owners over the centuries, evolving from its late 16th century Tudor origins into a property that blended multiple styles and influences. Initially constructed as a timber-framed house with small panel framing and decorative bracing, the hall's Tudor character formed the foundation of its identity. Then there was the Georgian wings added in the late 18th century. This made the hall more symmetrical in design. Further alterations in the 19th century reflected the Victorian fascination with revivalist styles. The hall was remodelled to include a mock Tudor facade, obscuring much of the original timber framing. Pevsner's Architectural Survey of Staffordshire notes additional features contributing to the hall's character, including a coach house, a gamekeeper's cottage, and a distinctive brick tower designed to resemble a church spire. The hall's grounds, though smaller than in its original form, also bear the marks of its evolution. Ornamental ponds on the property are believed to have been former fish stews, a practical feature common to estates of its age. And a centrally placed walled kitchen garden provided produce for the household, while formal walks and pathways, now overgrown, hint at the estate's past grandeur. An interesting story happened in 1785. It was the haunting of Francis Ald. And it's interesting because manuscripts were discovered among old deeds by Jim Spencer, who was a director at rare book auctions in Lichfield. They tell how Ald, then residing at Seighford Hall, was visited in the early hours by an apparition of his mother. He felt a sudden puff of air across his face before witnessing a cloud of vapour that took on his mother's form. The apparition spoke to him, saying, "My child, be not grieved, I am dead but happy." What's strange is at the time of this visitation, he had no idea that anything had happened. She was living at Pitt Place in Surrey, but he sent a servant to Stafford Post Office, where a letter awaited him, and the letter, dated 2 days earlier, said his mother was tolerably well, and said that she'd recently enjoyed a hearty meal of hare sent to her by Ald himself. But a few days later, he received another letter confirming that his mother had passed away on the night of March the 28th to 29th, exactly at the time of the visitation. And apparently the shock caused him to faint. What makes this so significant, though, is that it's documented in detail by Reverend Thomas Whitby of Creswell and the Reverend Townsend of Melpass in Cheshire, who discussed a very uncommon event in correspondence. And the testimony of Ald's servant, also recorded by Whitby, lent further credibility to the story. Whitby described the servant as a man of integrity and intelligence. And unlike many ghost stories of the period, this account was treated with serious attention, partly because of its documentation by clergymen and the personal testimony of those involved. By the mid-20th century, Seighford Hall had begun a series of transformations that reflected its shifting fortunes and changing utility. From 1947 to the 50s, the hall served as Staffordshire Police's driving school. The estate's spacious grounds and rural location made it an ideal site for training. By the 1970s, Seighford Hall took on a dramatically different identity as Blazes nightclub. During this period, the hall became a hub for social gatherings, drawing crowds from across Staffordshire and beyond. By the 1990s, Seighford Hall's role had shifted once more, this time as a nursing home. This phase of its history was brief but significant, and the nursing home ultimately closed. And by the early 2000s, the hall had fallen into disuse once again. One of the most bizarre episodes in the history of the hall happened recently, and it centred on the removal of a rare 16th century oak overmantel, valued at up to £5 million. The intricately carved Tudor artefact, believed to be between 417 and 462 years old, had Queen Elizabeth I's coat of arms, alongside detailed depictions of a lion and a dragon. It was an important part of the hall, and it was removed by Brian Wilson, who was a caretaker of the hall, and given away to a man called Andrew Potter, a local businessman and antiques dealer. He said it had woodworm and was apparently had no idea how old it was. However, when it became clear to the auctioneers how culturally significant it was, it prompted Stafford Borough Council to intervene, applying for an injunction to prevent its sale. It was found in a self-storage unit in Telford, and the council made it clear that selling the overmantel without the proper permissions would constitute a criminal offence under the Dealing in Cultural Object Offences Act. And the scandal deepened when it found out that other items had been sold from the hall, such as fireplaces and a tractor. Today the overmantel still remains unsold, with its fate uncertain, but it does highlight the vulnerability of heritage properties, particularly those left derelict and poorly managed. By 2020, Seighford Hall had been purchased by the First Blue Group for £275,000, following nearly 2 decades of abandonment. And they announced ambitious plans to invest £15 million into the project, envisioning a 64-bedroom hotel with log cabins, a walled garden, and a restaurant showcasing local and homegrown produce. And though the grand intention started, progress on the redevelopment soon stalled, and it seems to have been stopped for a while. As of late 2024, Seighford Hall remains derelict, its grounds overgrown, and its interiors in a state of significant decay. Years of neglect have left the building vulnerable to weather damage and vandalism, and no updates on the project's future have been forthcoming from First Blue Group. The hall was also in Save Britain's Heritage Buildings at Risk register in 2020. The hall's modern decline is a stark contrast to its former grandeur, reflecting the difficulties of balancing commercial ambitions with the practicalities of restoring a historic estate. While the property's potential as a luxury destination remains undeniable, its current derelict state is a sobering reminder of how easily heritage can slip into decay when restoration efforts falter. Now, as this once proud estate faces an uncertain future, Seighford Hall serves as a poignant reminder of both the fragility and the enduring allure of English heritage. Its story calls for greater appreciation and care for historic properties, so they don't slip into obscurity. Seighford Hall, with all its beauty and complexity, remains a symbol of the challenges and possibilities of preserving the past while looking to the future.